previous Rebbe said that today it was Chayel. He said, today is 50 years since I heard the first time from my father on this day the words Good Yontif. Today is the birthday of the two great luminaries, the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. The reason why he said today is the first time is because, in fact, a lot of the information that we have today and that I'm going to be saying now, a lot of the information was most of it was really unknown. And the one who made it known to the public was the previous Rebbe. And up until that point, people knew very little about Chai Elul. It was something passed down from one Rebbe to the next Rebbe to the next Rebbe. It was known within the home of the Rebbe. And the Frierdiker Rebbe writes that a lot of this information he received from his father, and a lot of the information he received from his grandmother. Rebbetzin Rivka, which was the wife of the Rebbe Marash, she told the previous Rebbe a lot of the stories of the history, which were passed down from Rebbe to Rebbe. And he attributed a lot of what he shared that it came from her, from this Rebbetzin Rivka. And just to understand that this is something very valuable, the last mimer that the previous Rebbe said, which is known by the name of Basi Lagani, one of the things he says in the mimer is he talks about when it comes to victory, when a king, for example, is involved in a war and he has enemies and he has to defeat his enemies, victory is something that touches a person in the deepest places, that he'll do things that he wouldn't do for anything else except for being victorious in a situation where he has enemies that are trying to defeat him. And one of the examples that he gives is that there are certain treasures that the king keeps in his palace, and there are certain treasures that he received from his parents and his great-parents, grandparents. In other words, it's in the royal family for generations, and nobody touches them, nobody uses them. There's certain things that maybe from time to time, if there's some special occasion, a big party, they'll come out, they'll show everybody these treasures that they have. And there's certain things they won't even do that. It's just something which they keep hidden away from everyone else. However, if there's a war and the king needs to do whatever he can to finance his war, he'll even give out and give away these treasures that have been hidden for generations in order to win the war. This was an analogy. And it was all about bringing out the point how victory touches a king to the essence. And he was talking about Gullus, that we have a war. The war is with, of course, the Yitzhahara, and the war with Klippa in general. Winning that war means Mashiach coming, and how it has to touch us to the essence. When the Rebbe spoke about this, he said that one of the things this is alluding to, these secrets that have been hidden in the treasures of his grandparents for generations, are the stories about the history of the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid and the Alter Rebbe, Mitzvah Rebbe, a lot of internal information that was never known to Chassidim. Only the Rebbes themselves knew about this as it was handed down from generation to generation. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was the first one to sort of share this with the public. And why did he do that? Because he felt this was necessary at this point in time in order to win the war. So obviously there's tremendous spiritual wealth in these stories, a lot of depth in these stories. In fact, that's what pushed me to do the series that I have on the stories of the Rebbeim, the Alter Rebbe, the Mitzvah Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek. Reading that, I said to myself, and this was in the 1990s, it was in 1989, there was totally no way of someone reading it if they didn't know Hebrew. So that was the first time it was sort of brought out in English for that purpose. So, therefore, we're going to start with, first of all, I want to go through the list of all the things that happened on Chai Elul, and then go back and elaborate on each one a little bit. So the first one is the birth of the Baal Shem Tov. That's when it all started. And that was 1698. So we're talking about 2.5, 250 years ago, almost. And then on the Baal Shem Tov's 26th birthday, again on the same day, that was when they began to study with Achia Shiloini. I'll still go back on all this and elaborate. The third thing that happened was that on the day of Chai Elul, on the Baal Shem Tov's 36th birthday, that's when he began to teach Hasidus to the public. And unfortunately, at that time, that's when all the big controversy broke out. Yeah, Hasidus, no Hasidus. That's where it all began. But ultimately, Hasidus spread to the rest of the world. When the Baal Shem Tov was 47 years old, on his 47th birthday, that's when the Alter Rebbe was born. 46th birthday. And the Alter Rebbe, that's the beginning of Hasidus Chabad. Also, number 4 was the Alter Rebbe's parents. Rabbi Baruch and Rabbi Tzarivka, their wedding was also on Chai Elul. It was actually on a Friday, so it was the 17th of Elul, but it was meant to be starting in Elul. The Alter Rebbe was born on the same day, Chai Elul. The Mittel Rebbe settled in the city of Lubavitch, became the headquarters of Chabad Hasidim on Chai Elul. We just spoke the other day about the Yeshiva Tamchit Tmimim of the Rebbe Rashab that started on Chai Elul. The Friedrich Rebbe moved into 770 here in 1940. That was on the 19th of Elul. Again, it was meant to be Chai Elul, so we did it a day after for whatever reason. And the Rebbe began rebuilding 770 on the 17th of Elul, also no simple matter. And we'll go into that a little bit if time allows. And the last thing is number 10. And that is that the Baal Shem Tov said that from the day of Chai Elul begins our preparation for Rosh Hashanah. There are 12 days, and these are 12 days that we can correct everything for the 12 months, like you said yesterday. So let me start with the first thing. The first thing is the birth of the Baal Shem Tov. Again, everything that I'm telling you, as usual, there's so many details, but we don't have the time for all that. So I'm going to give the general gist of it. The Baal Shem Tov's parents were tzaddikim, hidden tzaddikim. Hidden tzaddikim means there are people that if you look at them and you observe them, you would see nothing unusual. They look like anybody else. Not only that, some of them look like they were just simple or even ignorant Jews, but in reality, they were great tzaddikim, had vast knowledge of Torah, but for whatever reason, they had to hide their identity. So the Baal Shem Tov's parents were one of this group of people. He was a hidden tzaddik, and his wife was a tzaddikus, and they lived for many years, married, and had no children. And then it was decided in heaven that they should be blessed with a child. But right before that, it said that he would be tested one more time. And it was Friday afternoon, and somebody knocked on the door and asked if he can be a guest for Shabbos. And of course, that's a big mitzvah to have a guest for Shabbos. So the Baal Shem Tov's father invited him into the house. But this guest happened to be the worst nightmare you can possibly have for a guest. He was extremely rude. He ate the food before they even started the meal. He ate so much that he became nauseous and a lot of other things happened. I won't go into the gory details. This is Friday night, Shabbos day. He was the worst kind of guest you can imagine. And he said to himself, he's my guest. I'm not going to be angry at him. I'm not going to toss him out of the house. I'll be nice to him. This is the way the whole Shabbos went. When Shabbos was over, he was making Havdalah. This guest that looked like some sort of wandering Jew, suddenly something changed in him. And he said to him, I want you to know that I'm not an ordinary person. I am actually Eliyahu Novi. I was sent down from heaven to test you, to see how you would perform this mitzvah. And of course, you passed the test with flying colors. I don't know if you use the word flying colors, but you passed the test. And I want to tell you that next year, you and your wife will be blessed with a son, and this child will be a source of, will light up the whole Jewish nation. And a year later, the Baal Shem Tov was born. His father's name was Rabbi Lezer, and his mother's name was Sarah. On the other side of the sheet, you have a little bit of that, details about Baal Shem Tov. So that's how it all started. Unfortunately, what? Yes.
The source of this story.
The source, the previous Rebbe's Sicha. He tells the story, right? And how do we know the Baal Shem Tov himself told the story? Like, how do we know Eliyahu Nabi came to test him? So obviously the Baal Shem Tov's parents told him, and he repeated it. He told it over. The Baal Shem Tov, unfortunately lost his parents at a very young age. By the age 5, he already was an orphan from both parents. And the Baal Shem Tov's father, before he passed away, he told him 2 things. And the Baal Shem Tov said that these 2 statements were his guiding lights for the rest of his life. What were the 2 statements? One was, you should love every Jew with every fiber of your being, from the depth of your heart. Unconditional love for every Jew. And the second thing was, do not be afraid of anyone or anything in the world except Hashem himself. These were his 2, almost like 2 commandments. One in the positive and one was in the negative. Do not be afraid. So Baal Shem Tov said that he was studying in the community school. The community took care of him, but he loved to hang out in the forest. He loved the forest. It's a quiet place, peaceful, tranquil, and he would hang out there a lot. One day he's in the forest and he hears noise and he sees there's a Jew, an elderly Jew, with a, I don't know, elderly Jew, but a Jew with a beard and tallis and tefillin, and he's davening. And it was just very inspiring to watch him daven. So he's hiding behind a tree, watching him, until the person finished davening, getting ready to pack tallis and tefillin. And then he came out from behind the tree. And the man looked at him and said, what is a little boy doing in the forest alone? Aren't you afraid? So he said, no, I'm not afraid. My father told me I should never be afraid of anything or anyone except Hashem himself.
Who said this?
The Baal Shem Tov.
Baal Shem Tov's father said this to Baal Shem Tov.
Said it to the Baal Shem Tov. So he repeated this to this person. So this person said to him, are you perhaps the son of Rabbi Lezer? He said, yes, that's my father. And then he said to him, come, let's sit down and learn something. He sat down to study, and then he said, I'll take you along with me. Turned out that this person was also a hidden tzaddik, and he took the Baal Shem Tov under his wings for a few years, studied Torah with him. I always thought about, so what happened to the community? Did they ever find out where he went? Apparently they weren't very much involved in taking care of him, because he just went off. It doesn't say that he sent a message or sent a telegram or a text letting them know that he left. Must have been something that he did. But he went off with this person. And after being there for a few years, he stopped off in someone's house. Here, he didn't even know this person's name. He just knew he's a big tzaddik. He learned teaching in Torah. And then he gave him over to another person whose name was Rabbi Meir, also a hidden tzaddik. And he continued to study with him, taught him Gemara, taught him everything else in Nigla, and he taught him Kabbalah, and in those days it was mainly Kabbalah that he taught him, and he became himself part of the group of the hidden tzaddikim. So these were a group of people. The Gemara, by the way, says that in every generation there are 36 hidden tzaddikim, because they know that they're one of them, but nobody knows. And anybody here in this room, you don't have to identify yourself if you're one of those hidden tzaddikim, but a lot of these people, Okay, at least we know we have one. So the Baal Shem Tov became part of the group, and at the age of 16, it says he was already knowledgeable, vast knowledge of Torah in general, and vast knowledge of Kabbalah, and so on. Then the Baal Shem Tov says this is the following that happened. It was a Friday afternoon. He was getting ready to preparing for Shabbos. And the Baal Shem Tov's custom was that every Friday afternoon he would immerse in the mikveh as a preparation for Shabbos. It's a holy day, so he would immerse in the mikveh as preparation for Shabbos. So a certain image appeared to him of a person, an older person. And he said to him, "Do you know who I am?" So he said, "No." So he said, "You should know that I was sent from heaven to teach you Torah, and we're going to be studying every day by the mountains, the outskirts of the city. And I will come every day to learn with you, and I'll teach you how to conduct yourself, but you're not allowed to share this with anyone. And at this point, even your wife shouldn't know what I'm telling you now." When I asked him his name, he said, "With time, you'll know." No, I made a mistake. This is not when he immersed in the mikveh. This was before that. He just said he was sitting and he fell asleep. He had no control, and then he saw this person. After that, he went to the mikveh, he went immersed in the water, and he saw this person again. And at that point, when he saw this person, the first time apparently it didn't shake him up the same way. But when he entered the water and saw the person, he felt a tremendous fear, awe, or that something very high and very holy. Friday night in shul, people kept looking at him, asking him if he feels okay, something looks different. And he didn't say anything to anyone, even his own family members, his wife, his brother-in-law. They all said, "You look different, something happened." He didn't answer. The next day, which was Sunday morning, he went to the spot where he was told to be. He realized now that this is something very real. And sure enough, he saw this older person that he saw before in his dream, that he saw before in this image, and he followed him to a cave in one of the mountains. When he walked in there, there was a table and two chairs. He sat down on one chair, and he told him to sit down on the other chair. And then he took out a sefer. He never saw the sefer before. And they began learning together. The Baal Shem Tov said as they began learning, he felt that the gates of wisdom just opened up for him. Never experienced anything like this. They studied for 2 hours, and he said to him, "Okay, this is enough. But remember, no one should know what's going on until I'll tell you that it's okay to share it with someone." He gave him a bracha and said, "We'll meet tomorrow at the same time." And he asked him, "What is your name? Who are you?" I would assume that at that point, the Baal Shem Tov already met Eliyahu Navi. So he knew this was not Eliyahu Navi, but some other tzaddik of a past generation that is studying with him. And he said to him, "With time, you'll know." The Baal Shem Tov says, a year later, as they finished learning and they were about to part, the person said to him that he is Achia Sheleinu. And when he heard that he's Achia Sheleinu, the Baal Shem Tov fainted. Who was Achia Sheleinu? Achia Sheleinu was the teacher, the Rebbe of the Eliyahu Navi. Achia Sheleinu, he was a Navi, but he was the teacher of Eliyahu Navi. He also was one of the people that the Gemara says that he lived hundreds of years. He lived from the time he was in Mitzrayim. He went out of Mitzrayim, and he lived till the times of Eliyahu Navi, which was past the days of King David. So it's talking about 500 or more years. He fainted. He woke him up from his faint, and he said that he studied with him for 10 years. After the 10 years, or as it was getting closer to 10 years, his Rebbe said to him, now the time has come that what I taught you, you have to teach others. And the Baal Shem Tov said that he really didn't want to, for two reasons. First of all, just out of his humility. Why me? There are other hidden tzaddikim, and they're also capable to do the same. They're older than me. Baal Shem Tov was very young. He started to study with him at age 26. And the second thing, Baal Shem Tov knew that this is something new that's going to be revealed, and it's going to create a lot of controversy. There's going to be a lot of opposition. And of course, the Baal Shem Tov was already at age 5. His father told him to love every Jew and just wants love and peace and people getting along. And here he's going to be the one that through his actions is going to be a big machlekes, a lot of arguing and controversy. So he begged him that he should not push him to have to do this. But he didn't stop. He said, no, you have to come out in the open. You have to come out in the open. And then finally, he said to him, you should know that if you don't agree to come out in the open, I will no longer meet with you. That's an ultimatum. And in fact, he stopped meeting with him. Then the Baal Shem Tov said that he asked his father, who already was in the world of truth, he was, of course, not in this world, that his father should speak to Achi Ashileni and ask him that he should allow him not to reveal himself. So he was trying everything he can. At the end, we find the story that he did not speak to him, but he spoke to someone else, who was Rabbi Adam Baal Shem. There's a chain of command from the first one to start revealing Kabbalah publicly was the Arizal. He lived how many years before the Baal Shem Tov? About 200 years before the Baal Shem Tov. No, less than 200 years. But he had a student. There was another great tzaddik who continued teaching Kabbalah. His name was Rabbi Yoel Baal Shem. And he had a student, Rabbi Adam Baal Shem. He was like the head of these hidden tzaddikim. And he was the greatest tzaddik amongst those that taught Kabbalah. And his father spoke to him and asked him that he should his father asked Achi Ashileni that he should allow him to remain hidden. So Achi Ashileni gave the mission to this person, Rabbi Adam Baal Shem, that he should tell the Baal Shem that he must reveal himself, and he told him the reason. And the reason was, which eventually is what the Baal Shem Tov finally agreed. The reason was, he said to him that the Baal Shem Tov's neshama, his soul, was here 200 years earlier, and he lived in the city of Tzfas. And he was a simple Jew. In that lifetime, he was a simple Jew. But on the day of his bar mitzvah, he did something outstanding, and it was decided in heaven that because he did this thing which was so outstanding, Eliyahu Navi will come to him and will reveal to him when Mashiach will come. The secret that everybody wants to know, he will be told that secret. So it was actually one night, midnight, he heard a knock at the door, this Jew, and he asked who's there, and he heard the answer, Eliyahu Navi. Somebody walked in, the whole room lit up, and he said to him that I was sent from heaven to tell you this secret when Mashiach will come, and that's all because of the thing that you did on the day of your bar mitzvah. But I'd like to know, what is it that you did on the day of your bar mitzvah that was so outstanding that you deserve this reward? So this simple Jew answered, I'm really sorry, but whatever I did only for Hashem alone, and I'm not going to share that with anyone else. So he said, if you don't tell me your secret, I won't tell you my secret. And his answer was, okay, I can't. What I did was purely for Hashem, and he didn't want to tell it to anyone else. And Eliyahu left. When he came back to the heavenly court, they made a big commotion. Imagine how amazing this person is. He had the opportunity that Eliyahu Navi wants to give him this big, gift, and he doesn't do it because what I did for Hashem is purely for Hashem. It wasn't for people to know, to get any kind of credit, to get any kind of reward. It was just purely for Hashem. So they said, now he really deserves a gift. and a reward, and he sent him down a second time. And this time it was to teach him Torah, because he was a simple Jew. And he taught him Torah, and eventually he became a big tzaddik. He himself became one of the hidden tzaddikim. When he passed away, and his soul came to the heavenly court, they said that he lived an amazing life, and he reached highest heights. But there's one thing which he didn't do, and for that reason, his soul is going to have to come down to this world a second time. What is it? He didn't share with anyone else the Torah knowledge that he had. So he has to come down to this world a second time, and this time he has to make that up by sharing his Torah knowledge with others. So he told the Baal Shem Tov, you are a reincarnation of that person. Your neshama is that person's soul. And the whole purpose why your neshama came down to this world is to teach others. And therefore, if you don't agree to come out in the open and teach what you know now to others, then you have no purpose to be in this world, and your life will have to come to an end. And that's when the Baal Shem Tov understood that he actually has no choice. So at age 37, that's when on his birthday, again on the same day, Chai Elul, Baal Shem Tov came out and began to teach Chassidus. And in one source it says that the Baal Shem Tov lived 6 years less because of the 6 years that he was resisting to come out in the open. And I just want to mention that this is nothing new. In the Torah world, Torah leaders always resisted to take on positions of leadership. And in fact, the first leader in Jewry was Moshe Rabbeinu. And it says in the Medrash that Hashem told Moshe by the burning bush, I want you to become the leader of the Jewish people, take them out of Mitzrayim. And Moshe Rabbeinu had this dialogue with Hashem, and he was arguing that he is not worthy, better let it be his brother Aaron. And in the Torah, it just says that. But in the Medrash, it says that this dialogue went on for 7 days, a whole week. He gave Hashem a reason why not. Hashem gave him a reason why yes. He gave a new reason why not. Hashem gave him a new reason why yes. And this continued for 7 days. So finally, Hashem said, enough. This is the command. You have to come out in the open, and you have to lead the Jewish people. So this is what happened here with the Baal Shem Tov. And sure enough, that's what happened when the Baal Shem Tov came out in the open. The Baal Shem Tov, unfortunately, he was met with a lot of opposition. I'm not talking about opposition from people who had issues with Yiddishkeit. Opposition from the greatest Torah giants of that generation. Why he had the opposition was because a few years earlier, there was a very tragic point in history. And there was a Jew by the name of Shabtai Tzvi, and he studied Kabbalah. In those days, studying Kabbalah was very rare. He gathered students around him. He acted in very strange ways because everything was based on Kabbalah. And he came out and declared himself as Mashiach. Everybody was very excited. He had a lot of followers. The only problem is he started to violate different areas of Torah. And when they asked him, how is he allowed to do this? His answer was, I am Mashiach. And there's very deep Kabbalistic reasons for what I'm doing. But in Judaism, there's no such thing. Everything and anything a person does has to be based on Torah. And no matter who the tzaddik is, no matter who the prophet is, even a prophet has to follow the guidelines of Torah. So first he ate food which wasn't kosher, then he began to violate Shabbos, then he got involved in a relationship with women that were inappropriate, and everything he did, he said that he is, but in those days, communication wasn't like today. There was a lot of confusion. People didn't know what's right, what's true, what's hearsay. At the end, he was arrested. Why was he arrested? Because he kept telling people that he's soon becoming, he lived in Turkey, he's soon becoming the king, and in fact, the Sultan in Turkey is going to take the crown off his head and put it on his head. Well, when someone says that, he gets arrested because he's basically going for the crown. They arrested him, and his verdict was to be executed. And then they said to him, there's one way you can save your life. If you agree to convert to Islam, then we'll allow you to live. And he did. He converted to Islam. And when they asked him, How are you allowed to do that? What was his reason? This is a real, very deep mystical secret that only Mashiach can see that. So anyway, a Mashiach that converts to another religion is either somebody who is insane or a false Mashiach, one of the two, but definitely false. Unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, the good news was that when that happened, most of the people that followed him realized that he's a fake.
Isn't there a syndrome?
And they let go.
Like Jerusalem syndrome. People think they're Mashiach or something like that.
That what?
There's like a whole, met disorder that people in Israel like treat the people that think that they're Mashiach. Called Jerusalem.
Yes. Well, listen. Unfortunately, people who are mentally, disturbed think this one thinks he's Napoleon. This one, they all think of people that are great people, and they try to imagine that that's who they are. Of course, but people say that he was brilliant. There is a difference of opinion amongst historians. Was he just somebody crazy, or he was actually a very wicked Russian? But obviously, whatever he did was definitely evil, and it misled many Jews. And even after he converted, there were, I think, like 200 people that followed him. And but most of the people realized that he's a fake, and everything stopped. But when the Baal Shem Tov came out with Chassidus, immediately this was like a trauma. Immediately, people identified, this is this movement reawakening. And they said, this time we have to nip it in the bud. And immediately there was tremendous opposition against the Baal Shem Tov and against the Maggid. People didn't even bother to know who is he and what's really going on. It's Kabbalah. They thought for sure this is the same movement. But unfortunately, there was a lot of fighting. But at the end, people started to realize that this is very different. This is Torah and mitzvahs, and this is even a higher, deeper level of observing Torah and mitzvahs. And this was, and eventually it all stopped. But there was a time where they gave out a document of excommunication that anyone who studies Hasidus or anyone who's connected to Hasidus is as if not part of the Jewish nation, and we should have nothing to do with him. But it was all based on lack of information and lack of knowledge, and that's why eventually it all fell apart. So this is generally describing the Baal Shem Tov, and of course he is considered the founder of Hasidus. Now we'll go to the Alter Rebbe. Yes.
I know ago of Shabtai Tzvi, like did why he decided to expect people to convert to Islam? Did he have like some benefits from this?
Yeah, the benefit was that they allowed him to live. They were going to kill him. They were going to execute him, and they said if he converts, they'll let him live. So he converted. He was still, preaching the same things, but he converted to another religion to save his life. Throughout the ages, Jews gave up their life not to convert, but obviously he was fake. So I want to talk a little bit about the Alter Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe's birth. So the Baal Shem Tov had thousands of people that flocked to him, but he had 60 students these were his inner circle students, which means these 60 people, each one was a very big tzaddik in his own rights. And each one of them was literally a giant, a spiritual giant. And the Baal Shem Tov would meet with these 60 students separately. In addition to that, there were thousands of people that followed him. After the Baal Shem Tov passed, the one who took over leadership was the Maggid of Mezrich. His name was Rav Dov Ber. The Maggid of Mezrich, when he took over leadership, the Hasidic movement became much bigger. So many more tens of thousands of people joined the Hasidic movement because obviously he spread out. He taught them Hasidus, and they realized that everything people say against Hasidim is based on lack of knowledge and misinformation. I mean, just to give you an example, what I mean by misinformation is, whenever there's controversy, we should always know there are two kinds of people. There's certain people that are sincere, but just misinformed. But there's always people that love controversy. and they make sure to add a little bit of fuel to the fire to make it bigger, and they spread rumors and do all sorts of things that are unfortunately not true. So, for example, one of the things that they spread about the Baal Shem Tov and the Chassidim were when someone came to a Bezdin, to a Jewish court of rabbis, and he testified, I saw this with my own eyes, it was Tisha B'Av, and the Chassidim were eating and drinking. And this is one of the things that Shabtai Tzvi did. Tisha B'Av, where every Jew feels this is a day to fast because the temple was destroyed, they were eating and drinking. So later it was found out that what he said was actually true. He just didn't inform one piece of information. He just left out one. Sometimes when you lie, there's two ways of lying. You fabricate a story, or you tell a half a story. So he told the story, which is true. They were eating and drinking on Tisha B'Av. What he didn't say was that Tisha B'Av was on Shabbos. When Tisha B'Av was on Shabbos, you're not allowed to fast. But it was done specifically in order to provoke people, to make people angry, to incite people, unfortunately. This went on by the Mezritcher Maggid. Now, when the Mezritcher Maggid was nostalgic, when he passed, that's when the Hasidic movement split into different branches. He had 120 students, double the amount of the Baal Shem Tov, which were his inner circle. Each one of them was a spiritual giant in his own right, big tzaddikim, and each one spread and taught Hasidus in his territory. And the Alter Rebbe, who was actually the youngest of the 120, he taught Hasidus his way, and that became known as Hasidus Chabad. So I want to go a little bit into the history of the Alter Rebbe and his birth. So as we said before, the Alter Rebbe's parents, they were hidden tzaddikim. His father's name was Reb Baruch. His mother's name was Rivka. And again, this is something which the Baal Shem Tov said. These things were never known. The Frierdiker Rebbe was the first one to share them, which he heard from his father and grandfather and so on. And that is that the Alter Rebbe, Neshama, was a Neshama Chadasha. What does that mean? A Neshama Chadasha means a new soul. Generally speaking, 99.99% of the Neshamas in this world, in all the recent generations, were all neshamas that were here already and come down a second time, a third time, a fourth time. And the reason why the neshama comes another time is because something before remained incomplete, so it comes down again to complete it, or a third time to complete another detail. Neshama chadasha means a new neshama that was never here in this world before. So Baal Shem Tov said like this: every soul, before it comes down to this world, is informed before it comes down that you're coming down to this world, and the neshama is given an entire year to prepare itself. It's a big transition to go from the spiritual world down to planet Earth. Big transition. So the neshama has to prepare itself spiritually. When a new neshama comes down to this world, it needs 3 years to prepare itself. Obviously, the reason is that the transition is a much greater transition because the new neshama is a whole different caliber of a soul. And therefore, the Baal Shem Tov said that he knew about it only a year before, that there's a new neshama that's coming down to this world. And he said he tried to find out who that is, where this baby is going to be born, who are going to be the parents, but he couldn't find out. This was considered highly sensitive information, top secret. Even angels in the heavenly realm did not know who the new neshama is going to be, because apparently any kind of exposure could do damage. I guess there are certain sources that try to block it because these are souls that are going to make tremendous spiritual contributions to the world. So they try to block it, and therefore it wasn't known. But the Baal Shem Tov said that a year before he became aware that there is a new neshama coming down, but he didn't know who this is going to be. The Baal Shem Tov had a student who was Reb Baruch and his wife Rivka. They got married with the Baal Shem Tov's consent, and like I wrote here in the paper, they also got married on Chai Elul. It was a Friday afternoon. Those days they made weddings on Fridays, So it was Friday going into Chai Elul, just like today. They got married. In the first year, they had no children. So the following year, he came to the Baal Shem Tov for a bracha, that he should be blessed with a child. Baal Shem Tov gave him a bracha, that next year, on this day, he told him, on this day, which was Chai Elul, you're going to have a child. And it's interesting, when the Baal Shem Tov gave the bracha, he himself didn't know that this bracha will be the new neshama coming down to this world. But later, the Baal Shem Tov became aware of it. And then the Baal Shem Tov student said like this, that the Baal Shem Tov had a certain way that he conducted himself, and naturally, when he was preparing for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, this part, Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Baal Shem Tov was very tense and intense. It was a very serious time. After Yom Kippur was over, the Baal Shem Tov was in a very high place of simcha. And every day that went by after Yom Kippur, the simcha became progressively stronger and more intense and so on. That year that the Baal Shem Tov gave this bracha, something strange happened. The students didn't understand what it was all about, but the Baal Shem Tov's simcha began even before Rosh Hashanah. Everything he did was with simcha. It was in that kind of simcha mode, like he usually is before Sukkot and Simchas Torah. When Reb Baruch's wife informed him that the bracha of Baal Shem Tov was fulfilled, and she feels that she is expecting a baby, he came to the Baal Shem Tov to let the Baal Shem Tov know, even though he knew that the Baal Shem Tov, who he was, would definitely know, but he came to tell the Baal Shem Tov that the bracha has been fulfilled, and his wife is expecting. At this point, apparently the Baal Shem Tov became aware that this child that's going to be born is the new soul. And he told Reb Baruch that he should make a bracha with the word Shechiyanu, V'kimanu, V'giyanu, L'zman hazeh. Now this is a bracha you only make when there's something very exciting that happens in your life. And in this case, the baby wasn't even born yet. But obviously, because the Baal Shem Tov knew that this is not an ordinary baby, this is going to be the new neshama, so he told him to make the bracha Shechiyanu. And the next year, on the day of Chai Elul, the Baal Shem Tov did things which were very unusual. By the way, the Baal Shem Tov always had a gathering on Chai Elul because it was his birthday. And again, in those days, people didn't celebrate birthdays, but the Baal Shem Tov did. This was also not known, that the Baal Shem Tov used to celebrate his birthday. But on that day of the birthday, the Baal Shem Tov's joy knew no bounds. The students were very surprised. He never was in such a state of simcha on a birthday. And on that Farbrengen, the Baal Shem Tov said that it was a Wednesday, that on Wednesday, Hashem put up the luminaries to shine. And he said that on this Wednesday, today, the new neshama came down to this world. And again, there were no messages from there to the Baal Shem Tov, no way of knowing information except for Ruach HaKodesh. And he said that this new neshama is going to light up the world with two lights, Nigla and Chassidus. And basically, these are the two main works of the Alter Rebbe. Chassidus is the book of Tanya, and Nigla is the Alter Rebbe wrote the Shulchan Aruch with the Code of Jewish Law, which came, and the Baal Shem Tov said that he's going to have Mesiras Nefesh. He's going to put his life on the line to spread Chassidus, and he will succeed until the coming of Mashiach. That was on Wednesday. A few days later, it was actually 8 days later, the Baal Shem Tov said, today is the bris of that new neshama that came down to this world. And again, it was a tremendous simcha, and nobody knew who this is and what this is all about. The Mezritcha Magid told the Alter Rebbe that everything that the Baal Shem Tov spoke about on his bris, the day that he was born, and he said the reason why I'm telling you this is because everything he said on that day was about you and your shlichus, your mission in this world. The Baal Shem Tov, when the Rebbe Baruch came to tell the Baal Shem Tov that he had a son, Baal Shem Tov told him that you have to deal with him in a very special way. Told him the things that he should do. he also cautioned him that don't even tell people if they don't ask that you had a child. Keep it a secret. Keep a secret what his name is. Baal Shem Tov actually said that then again, without him even telling him that his name is Shneir Zalman, and the word Shneir is made up of two words, Shneir, two lights. And those are the two lights, one light in the revealed part of Torah and one light in the hidden part of Torah. Generally speaking, we know that parents are very excited about their little children, especially excited when they do things that are smart and make you wonder how did they know to do this? How did they know to do that? Obviously, the Alter Rebbe at a very young age was already doing things that were brilliant. Baal Shem Tov told the parents, don't share this with anyone. Everything about him, keep it undercover. Everything. And the Baal Shem Tov said he davened for him to the Alter Rebbe 3 times a day as he was growing up every day. Which means because this was something so strong in Kedusha and it was so important for him to later come out and teach a new path in serving Hashem, therefore he needed extra caution. When the Alter Rebbe turned 3 years old, they brought the Alter Rebbe to the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov cut his hair, and he kept asking, who is this person? He asked his parents, who is he? What's his name? They told him, he's the Zayda. Zayda means grandpa. But he wouldn't tell him his name. And the reason for that is because Baal Shem Tov cautioned them not to tell him who he is. In fact, even after he grew up, the Baal Shem Tov cautioned them that he should not know who he is. Why not? Apparently, there were 2 reasons Baal Shem Tov gave. One reason was that he's meant to be not my follower, but a follower of my successor. So he actually became a follower of the Maggid Mezrich. And it appears that if had he been a follower of the Baal Shem Tov, it would have on some level, some degree, interfered with him becoming a follower of the next Rebbe the way it should be. I have to give a little introduction to explain what this means. When any Rebbe became a new Rebbe, there was always a little bit of a situation with the older Hasidim. A Chassid is someone who is totally, completely devoted and dedicated to his Rebbe. And he learns from his Rebbe what his approach should be and how he should conduct himself. But as much as every Rebbe is a continuation of the Rebbe before, every Rebbe was unique, had things that were different. And not God forbid that there was a difference of opinion, but every generation is different, and therefore there are differences in how to serve Hashem. Like, for example, take this as an example. Why was there such opposition to the Baal Shem Tov with Hasidus? Yes, I told you because of Shabtai Tzvi. But even people that knew that the Baal Shem Tov was a tzaddik, and he was righteous, and there's no way that he has any negative intention, they were still against the Baal Shem Tov. Why? Because for generations, people did not study this hidden part of Torah. Why are you doing something that was never done before? It's unprecedented. And the Baal Shem Tov said, before not, but now yes. And they said, no, don't make any changes. So in other words, what the Baal Shem Tov really was teaching was there's certain things that up until a certain point were unacceptable. And then comes a time where this is necessary to be. And the same is with Chassidus. So basically, the same applies with even the details, that there are certain things that before it was no, and then later it's yes. In fact, there's also certain things that before was yes, and later becomes no. I don't know if you paid close attention when you do the chitas. We just had something in chitas, where Rashi says that it says in the Torah that you're not allowed to bring a sacrifice only in one place in the Beis Hamikdash. And Rashi says, in the times of Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, it wasn't necessary. Wherever they were able to set up stones, rocks, make a mizbeach, an altar, and bring a sacrifice. But once the Beis Hamikdash was built, Hashem said, if you do that, to me, it's repulsive like idol worship. I want you to bring sacrifice only in one place. So Rashi says, in the days of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, this was something which was loved by Hashem. And now it's something which is repulsed by Hashem. So there are things that in an early generation it was no, and in a later generation it became yes. And there's certain things that in early generation it was yes, and later generation can know. And the analogy to this is, I think I gave it in a different class, is like summer and winter. There's certain things you have in the summer, but you're not going to do that in the winter. And certain things which you have in the winter, you're not going to do that in the summer. So in the summer, you won't expect to see the same people you saw in the winter wearing gloves and boots and winter coats and scarves and masks on their face, because it's something which you only do in the winter. Sorry, something which you only do in the winter. Same thing, when the times change, there's a need for something different. And take example, this which we're doing right now, a women's yeshiva. How long is it that women have yeshivas? Anyone know?
When's begon stuff?
No.
Sarah Schneers.
What?
Since Sarah Schneers.
There was a woman called Sarah Schneer, and she established a yeshiva in Poland. When was this? A little bit over 100 years ago, maybe 120, 130 years ago. Up until then, there was no such concept of women studying in yeshiva. The study of Torah of women came orally from mothers to daughters, grandmothers to granddaughters, passed down. They taught them the laws of Shabbat, I'll get to in a second, the laws of kashrus, but there was no formal academic study like men in the yeshiva. And it changed. And not only it changed, today, if a woman and a girl wouldn't go study in yeshiva, her whole Yiddishkeit would be extremely weak. Yeah?
No, I had another question. Maybe you can answer it later on. But what's one inspiring book that you should take away from Chayel? Like, if you really want to,
You're saying after all my talking and talking and talking, you want to know what's the inspiring thought? The inspiring thought that we should take away from Chayelo and be thinking about during the next 24 hours is that I think I would say to myself, I feel very fortunate that I have a connection to Chassidus, have a connection to the Alter Rebbe, to the Baal Shem Tov, and to feel fortunate is not enough. I should take advantage of it. Take advantage of what I have. Because you can feel very fortunate that you got some opportunity, but if I don't take advantage, what's the point? So I think that's the main point. Anyways, I wanted to conclude that the Baal Shem Tov did not, it wasn't shared with the Alter Rebbe. He didn't know about it until later after Baal Shem Tov passed, and he was meant to be a student of the Magid, not of the Baal Shem Tov. So I wanted to explain the reason for this is because the Chassid was extremely devoted and dedicated to his Rebbe and dedicated to the path of his Rebbe. That's the point I wanted to bring out, that each Rebbe in their generation had a unique path. So besides the fact that there were different paths altogether, each Rebbe, like the Alter Rebbe, there were details there that were different than the Mittel Rebbe. And by the Mittel Rebbe, there were differences, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third generation of Chabad. Each generation, there were certain things which were different, not because the Rebbes disagreed, but because it's a new generation and there's a need for things that weren't there before. So therefore, when a chassid who loves his Rebbe with all his heart and soul, devoted and dedicated to his Rebbe's path, now a new Rebbe comes along and things are a little bit different, it becomes very difficult to adjust. So it appears that maybe one of the reasons were that if the Alter Rebbe had been a student of the Baal Shem Tov, and then would have been totally dedicated and devoted and with every fiber of his being and following that path, he would have had a hard time connecting to the Maggid Mizrich. And we find an interesting thing with our Rebbe. The third Rebbe, the fifth Rebbe of Chabad was the Rebbe Rashab. Our Rebbe was 19 years old when the Rebbe Rashab was nostalgic. His father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, was one of the biggest Hasidim of the Rebbe Rashab. And everybody wonders, so how is it possible that at age 19, the Rebbe never went to see the Rebbe Rashab? The Rebbe never met the Rebbe Rashab. And this had nothing to do with wars. This is before the wars started and things like that. And no one knows the answer. But obviously, there had to be a reason. And the only reason that could come to our mind is that it must have been some sort of instruction for Rebbe Rashab. Again, this is Hasidim say that perhaps it was the same thing, that the Rebbe Rashab wanted the Rebbe to be totally devoted and dedicated to the next generation, which is the Frierdiker Rebbe. And had he been a chassid of the Rebbe Rashab, it would have, on some sort of degree, it might have interfered, might have taken away something. And that's similar to what happened by the Alter Rebbe. The other reason the Baal Shem Tov gave was that the Alter Rebbe has to arrive and to appreciate Chassidus on his own. So therefore, he instructed his teachers, instructed his parents, everyone that was connected to him, don't share with him that we're connected to the Baal Shem Tov. It's interesting, all the people around him were connected to the Baal Shem Tov, but the Baal Shem Tov wouldn't allow it, that he should reveal to him that they're connected, because he wanted him to get there on his own. And the Alter Rebbe got there on his own, which means he did his research, he went to the Maggid, he looked around, he had to think about it. And I told the story to one of the classes that I remember, that not only he looked around, he actually came to a point where he almost decided that it's not for him. I'll mention the story briefly again, for those that didn't hear it. That the Alter Rebbe, when he came to the Mezritch Maggid, he was there for 2 weeks. And the Alter Rebbe says he was inspired to the highest point to see people davening and see their emotions. For Hashem, he never saw anything like it before. He saw people that almost like left this physical world because they were so emotional about their love for Hashem. But the Alter Rebbe said, I decided it's not for me. Up until now, I spent most of my time studying, and most of my time was spent in broadening my vast knowledge of Torah. And I wanted to dedicate myself more to do that. And I decided it's not for me, I'm going back home. So after 2 weeks, being by the Maggid of Mezritch, he left. And then he remembered, after traveling a few miles, that he forgot a very important package. So he went back to get the package. When he went back to get the package, he walked in, and he sees the Mezritch Maggid is sitting there, and a group of students are around him, and they're talking, and they're having some sort of a dialogue. So he walked over to hear what is it all about. Turns out there was some halachic issue. It wasn't Chassidus, this was halacha, Gemara. And he walked over to listen, and he heard things coming out of the mouth of the Mezritch Maggid, such brilliant insight in Gemara that never in his life had he heard anything like it. And then he said to himself, wow, if they could spend so much time on davening, at the same time they'd be so brilliant in the revered part of Torah, I'm staying here. So he changed his plans, and he stayed. He became a student and a chassid of the Mezritch Maggid. And it means that there was a point where he was like at the crossroads. Where should I go? So he had to make that decision himself, that this is for him. And when he decided to stay, the Maggid said to him, I want you to know that the Baal Shem Tov came to me, and he told me that you're going to come, and you're going to be here for 2 weeks, and then you're going to leave, and then you're going to come back. And when you come back, I should tell you who you are. I should tell you that you have a new neshama. Then he told him all these things, at least a little bit of the things which I told you, which we know from the Sichas, is the Mezritch Maggid told the Alter Rebbe, basically telling him, no, that you have a special mission, you have a certain shlichus, it's going to be very tough. In the beginning, it's going to be a lot of opposition, but you'll have the strength to be perseverance and go all the way through, and you will succeed until Mashiach comes. That's what the Alter Rebbe was told. And indeed, the Alter Rebbe was arrested one time with the intention to be executed, arrested through the Jewish people who opposed him, arrested a second time, and eventually the Alter Rebbe's teachings became spread to the whole world, as we see the way it is today. So I think this takes care of the first 5 points on this sheet. Then comes number 6. Again, to give you a brief history of number 6. I told you later. Brief history of number 6. I always think of someone that was a student here, Dahlia. She's she's in a college campus in
Sana.
Where? Dayasana, where is she?
Vasa.
Upstate New York.
Upstate New York. Anyway, she said that something happened which made her think about Yiddishkeit and everything else. And then she got inspired and then she left it. She said it was like the snooze on the alarm clock. You wake up in the morning and you wake up, you open your eyes, you put on snooze, but then it rings again 10 minutes later. Another thing happened, another thing happened. Finally, she got the message. Anyway, the war broke out between Russia and France, between the Tsar and Napoleon. And it's a story in itself how the Alter Rebbe considered Napoleon to be a big klipa. In other words, he wanted to spread the ideology in the world, which is atheism, not believe in God. And he's in fact responsible for a lot of the things that we have today in the modern way of thinking. And the Alter Rebbe was very much against him winning the war, did everything he possibly can, physically and spiritually, that he should lose the war. When we come to that time of the year, I'll go more into it. But as a result of that, the Alter Rebbe left his hometown. Not only he left his hometown, he gave instructions to burn his house down before Napoleon gets there. And the reason was because Napoleon was a sorcerer. And the Alter Rebbe said if he would get hold of any object, any article that belonged to me, he would try to use that to harm me. So Alter Rebbe gave instructions to burn the house down. So once, and the Alter Rebbe was on the run for many months, and Napoleon was trying to find where the Alter Rebbe is hiding out. At the end, the Alter Rebbe passed away because of the difficulties of the trips and the cold winter. Yeah. Why? Because he knew that spiritually he was opposing him. And not only that, but we'll hear the story later. He actually, I don't know if Napoleon knew this too, but actually had certain Hasidim acting as spies for the Russian army, helping the Russian army. But he, I think, because he was a sorcerer, he knew that the spiritual force that's fighting him is coming from the Alter Rebbe. It was called Rabbi Baruchovich. Yeah.
But he was source.
From the Alter Rebbe.
And we don't get this in public school history.
Right. In public school history, you won't find anywhere, not in Russian history and not American history, that the Alter Rebbe was any way involved in the war between Russia and the Tsar.
Really? Why?
I mean, Russia and France. What? No, it's not taught in French history. It's not taught in Russian history. Even though what we're taught is that the reason why the Tsar won the war and Napoleon lost the war because of the Alter Rebbe's intervention. But like I said, when it comes to that time of the year, which is the Alter Rebbe's passing, we're going to go into that story in more detail. So now that the Alter Rebbe passed away, they needed to find a new location. The old location was no good. Houses were burnt down. So the Mitzvah Rebbe was looking for a new place to settle. And he chose the city called Lubavitch. The city of Lubavitch has a lot of history. There's a book written by the previous Rebbe, it's called Memoirs, and that has the whole history of the city of Lubavitch. It was always apparently a place where the mystics, the hidden tzaddikim, would hang out, and the Alter Rebbe himself, when he was young, used to study with someone whose name was Rabbi Yisachar Ber, and he studied in the city of Lubavitch. When the Mitzvah Rebbe came, he said, "This is the spot where my grandfather studied 58 years ago, and now here we're going to establish our new residence." And that became the headquarters of Chabad for the rest of the world.
Mr. Rebbe was the son or the grandson?
Son. Mitzvah Rebbe was the son. The Mitzvah Rebbe literally means the middle Rebbe. Why they said the middle Rebbe was because there was Hasidim that knew his father, and that when he came the Rebbe, they would say the Rebbe the father, the Rebbe the son. And then he lived a short life. He passed away at the age of 52. The Tzemach Tzedek became the Rebbe. So a lot of the Hasidim when they say the word the Rebbe, which Rebbe are you referring to? They now knew three Rebbes: the Alter Rebbe, the second Rebbe, the third Rebbe. So they called him the middle Rebbe. That's why he got the name the Mittel Rebbe. Like we call the previous Rebbe the Frierdiker Rebbe. But that term was never used. It was only coined in our generation. But the word Alter Rebbe really means the same as the previous Rebbe. And the reason why we didn't use it, because it's already used for the first Rebbe. So in the second generation, when they wanted to refer to the first Rebbe, they would say the Alter Rebbe, which means the previous one. So number 7 is what happened in 1897, a little bit closer to our generation, which is the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, established the yeshiva of Temchet Mimim. And this wasn't just establishing a nice yeshiva, but it represented a new era in the spreading of Hasidus. So in a sense, just like the Baal Shem Tov was the first one to start teaching Hasidus, it wasn't done before. And the Alter Rebbe was the first one to start teaching Hasidus in a new path. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov told him, that your neshama came down as a new neshama, and you're going to introduce a new path in Hasidus itself. And even after that, what was done in the Shiva of Tamchit Tmimin was a new era in spreading Hasidus, which means that this was a gradual process. We're talking about the hidden secrets of Torah that were never studied before. It was a gradual process, how from generation to generation, more and more became accessible, became revealed. And in the times of the Rebbe Rashab, it reached a new point. The new point was that young men, this was young Bachrim, would be studying Chassidus, which obviously means that after everything that happened in the past, the world became more ready and more sort of suitable that Chassidus could be revealed. Before that, it was something which was not acceptable, and then it became acceptable. And even that moved along. I think I mentioned in one of the classes that in 1933, the previous Rebbe was one that introduced that now is a time that women should start studying Chassidus. Try to think of that. Until 1933, women did not study Chassidus. Women began to study Chassidus. And this idea that women should be shluchas and conquer the world, that started in our generation. So we see that it's a gradual process. Every generation is growing and getting closer to Mashiach. More and more things are happening. So this day of Chai Elul marks the day that Chassidus began to be studied to a new sort of, a new level that was never studied before. Number 8 is when the Frierdiker Rebbe moved to 770. And also that is not so simple, but I don't think we have enough time to go into all that. We'll leave that for a little bit later, but the Frierdiker Rebbe, was in Poland when the war broke out, the Second World War, and Poland was being bombed. The fact that he was able to escape Poland was literally a miracle. There's a long story behind it. The United States government was involved. There was some Nazi officer that was involved. That miraculously he was saved, and he came to America. Came to America in 1940, and he was looking for a place to settle. And as we settled here on Eastern Parkway, 770 Eastern Parkway, and it turned out one of the reasons, again, the Gashmi is why they chose this neighborhood, was because this house, because they had an elevator. And at that time, the Frierdiker Rebbe, even though he was young, he was 60 years old, he was in a wheelchair already, because of everything that he went through in Russia with the Russian jails. And this neighborhood was a very upscale neighborhood. Every other house was a doctor, a lawyer, one professional. It was a Crown Heights. It was not just Heights because it's physically very high. It's the highest point in Brooklyn, Crown Heights. But it was also occupied by professional people. In fact, the Jewish people living on the block all signed the petition that they don't want to have the Rebbe move in on this block. It's going to bring down the status of this upscale block. The reason why it didn't go through was because right next door to 770, there was a dentist, and he refused to sign this document. Jews just came out of Russia. They came out of wars, and they managed to save their lives to sign a document that I don't want them on my block because it's going to take away from the status of the block. He refused to sign it. And that was the law. If one person refused to sign it, it's not valid. And the Rebbe was always showed gratitude to this person. In fact, the Rebbe became a patient of this dentist. He lived next door to 770. And eventually, when he moved out, that became the Rebbe's private library. That house next door to 770, that's where the dentist lived.
Was he Jewish?
What? Yeah, he was a Jewish person. But again, in many sikhs, the Rebbe explained that when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America and settled in 770, it wasn't just a geographic change. He lived here, and now we live here. The Rebbe explained that was also a spiritual change, that in order to Chassidus to start being spread globally, it was important that it come to America. And of course, the spot that was chosen is this spot. And from here, this became the headquarters and the source of where Chassidus being spread to the rest of the world. And then the Rebbe himself expanded 770. I know Mrs. Demny teaches a sikha that the Rebbe explained the significance behind expanding 770. I'll leave it for that. And then the last thing I want to mention is that it's 12 days from tonight, it'll be 12 days. Each day corresponds to another month. That each day from now till Rosh Hashanah, we can correct the month before. Now that means sit down, what did I do wrong last year? Tishrei, what did I do wrong yesterday? Cheshvan. I would say not to focus on that, just what can I do right now, and that'll make up for everything I left out on Tishrei. And the next day, what can I do right that'll make up for everything on Cheshvan, which means each day has the power to bring healing and correction into the entire month. So just to focus on these last 12 days to improve the best we can. And again, the last thing on the page, it says, Chayes to the Aved of Elul. This is the way it's explained in the Sikhs, that the reason why all these things are connected to Chay Elul, because it was always felt that if Elul comes and you have to do tshuva, a person is going to be down, is going to be depressed, thinking about what's wrong, what do I have to improve. Chassidus teaches us that we can improve, we can grow, and not only there's no down, but on the contrary, it's filled with life. We're charged with a lot of life and energy. It's about going forward and about becoming closer and about appreciating and knowing all the good fortune that we have Torah and mitzvahs and connected to Hashem. And therefore, it's preparing for Rosh Hashanah, but in a very exciting way. And especially when we realize that Rosh Hashanah is all about Hashem accepting Hashem's sovereignty. And this is the day that we accept and we want Hashem to be the ruler over the world, which is Mashiach. And even though we're living in very turbulent times, especially after October 7th, on one hand, it's turbulent times. On the other hand, it's miraculous times. We are witnessing miracles. I said this the other day in one of the classes, that what happened during the week, this week, 2 days, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, with the beepers and the walkie-talkies, it's something which is miraculous. I know when you talk about something like this, people, well, who are these people? These are not people. They're hardly even animals. These are people who are trained and incited to, Rahman al-Islam, kill as many Jews as they can. And not just kill, but as you saw October 7th, in the most sadistic way. And in 1 minute, in a few minutes, thousands of them were disabled, not to be able to do what they want to do. And if you know the details, this is a miracle, that this should be something that they didn't detect before and was able to accomplish what it was supposed to accomplish is miraculous. And, we hope it didn't endanger any of these regular soldiers. It didn't endanger any other citizens. Whoever had one of these beepers or walkie-talkies, they were all part of Hezbollah. They weren't just ordinary citizens. Of course, they publicized otherwise because they want to always badmouth Israel. But basically, this was like a sure sign. Whoever had one of these things was part of the terrorist group. So Shem should help us that we should see it's a very special day. It's a day with it contains a lot of bracha. We should take advantage of the day and especially take advantage of Hasidus, our connection to the Rebbe, and so on. Okay, wishing everybody a great Shabbos. And if this day has so much history, so much amazing things happening, what's going to happen this Chayel? Let's wait and see. We'll bring about it on Sunday. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi Majeski.
Good shot.
You want to mention the difficulty?
Yeah, on the table you have these booklets where you have the brief history of the Alter Rebbe, history of the Baal Shem Tov.